Welcome to episode 5 of our Foraging and Feasting online series. It is now March, we are still in lockdown, however we have brought you here to the beautiful Minnadhu on the Rame Peninsula. Now as you can see behind me there is lots of colour, things are in bloom, our daffodils are popping up all around us, which are not edible, do not make that mistake. But we're going to take you through today 5 beautiful wild edibles that you can find in March, and we're going to really focus today on what we call plant lore. When we're thinking about remembering plants, it's nice to remember them like people. When we meet somebody new, we tend to think of something funny about them or something they've done when we're relating that information back to another person. For example, I met my new friend Dave at a party the other day. He's really funny. He got up at my friend's wedding and he did an Elvis impression. Or we can fix some of these things onto plants like we can people. So when we're talking about plants, we're going to remember funny things about them. We're going to be remembering important things, historical things, as a way to really fix them in our brain so we can remember what they are. So, without further ado, we're going to take you along the Minnadhu for episode 5. So here we are with our first wild edible of March. Now this one here is called Fennel. Now fennel is kind of a coastal plant. It doesn't grow inland all over the country, but if you live near the sea, you probably will find this growing wild in your location. It's got a very, very strong smell of aniseed. It's a really great one actually. The Romans used to believe that this would help you have a clarity of mind and help you concentrate. So it's a nice one to have in your diet if you're about to do exams or you need to do something where you need to remember clearly and have clarity of thought. In India, they use fennel to clean the palate, and they normally use the seeds coated in sugar and they eat them after a meal. It's a really, really beautiful fragrant herb which I like to pair with fish. So if you're eating oily fishes like mackerel, it makes a really nice sort of green sauce, a salsa verde. It also goes well with poultry, so things like chicken. If you eat meat, it's nice too. But if you're vegetarian, there's loads that you can do with it. I like to have this just in a salad bowl, but a favourite thing to do with fennel is to have it as a cup of tea. It really helps to aid with bloating and with digestion. It makes a nice fresh feeling in the mouth, and also if you are doing something that requires concentration and focus, it's nice to have fennel tea as a companion by your side. So this one, it's got a very fine fern-like appearance. It is one of the umbellifers, it's in the carrot family, but it's an extremely safe one to recognise and identify because it really does smell very strongly of aniseed, and none of the poisonous umbels in this family have a smell quite like it. So it's very young at the moment, it's green and it's fresh. It will get very tall and then it will have these lovely bright sort of green flowers on the top, and then it will go to seed. So at this time of year we're eating the young fresh green fronds just like this, and we're going to pick some today to put into a lovely salad. I've actually made some cheese, and when we come to the cookery part of the session today, I'll be teaching you how to make a very simple ricotta infused with one of the ingredients of fennel. Number 1. Excitingly then, here we are with wild edible number 2, and this one is the first edible bloom that we're going to be talking about today. Now you may not be able to see it in this little part of the bank, and that's where it gets exciting because we get to pull back some of the other vegetation and we'll see the little jewel shining through. And here it is the little, very unassuming but beautiful violet. Now violets are one of my absolutely favourite edible flowers, and they weren't just a favourite of mine, but a favourite of Queen Victoria. In fact, they were so much a favourite of Queen Victoria that she had growers specifically growing them for her, because this is what they used to use for perfume, and it's where the term sweet violet first came from, because they used to use it in posies to walk around with and sniff, because the smells at the time on the streets were really not that quite nice. And it was a favourite ingredient in perfumes until they started using the iris root, which is what then became more commonly known as a perfume base. But as an edible wildflower, it's got a lovely history of uses, and it's got a lovely array of uses in the kitchen today. If you put little violet blossoms into a cup of tea, it turns it bright purple, and you get that taste of Parma violet, like the little purple sweets you used to get when you were a kid. They work really nicely in sugar, so if you put these violets into a bowl of sugar and mash them down, you get a purple sugar which works really lovely on cupcakes or in a jelly. In fact, if you get a little muffin case and you put the violets in the bottom of the muffin case, a silicone one, not a paper one, and you pour on a hot jelly mixture and you put that into the fridge, when you take it out and you turn it upside down, you get all the violets on the top, which is a really beautiful little jelly to go next to an ice cream or a sorbet. Now, In Greek mythology, they believe that the goddess Artemis turned one of her nymphs into a violet to stop the god Apollo from basically perving on her. And it's where the term shrinking violet comes from, because when they hang in the hedgerow, they've got this little they shrink their heads, they look very shy and demure, which is where that term comes from. So all these things help us to remember what violets are. They don't just come in purple, they do come in other colours, but the violets that we find in the hedgerow are this beautiful purple colour. So they have a 5-petalled flower with a little white indentation in the middle, a slight little yellow, and they are sweet and fragrant and beautiful. Put them in your salad bowl, put them into your breakfast dishes, put them into your teacups, put them onto your cakes, but they are a real occasion in spring, and they do certainly make everything look beautiful at this time of year. So that's number 2, our edible violet. Here we are then with number 3 on our list, and if you look down here into the hedgerow, we're looking at another edible bloom. If I pick one out, this little white flower is called Stitchwort. Now the reason why it's called Stitchwort is because they used to believe that if you were running a long distance and you got a pain in your side, a stitch, that if you ate this plant it would take the stitch away. Now I don't think that's ever really worked. It could be what's known as an old wives' tale, but it does certainly help you to remember what this plant is called and whether or not it is edible. And it is. It's got this really beautiful little heart-shaped petals, and it's got this gorgeous little bit of yellow on its stamen in the middle. Now the great thing about Stitchwort is though the blooms are edible and we use those as floral decorations in our salad bowl and in our dishes, the actual unopened flower buds and the leaves themselves taste like peas. Now as you know, if you've been watching our episodes, you'll know that lots of greens in the hedgerows have a fresh pea-like flavour, and none so much really as the Stitchwort shoot. So what you do when you look at the plant, if you come down, you'll see we've got the little lance-like leaves and then the unopened flower buds, and when you're picking them as a vegetable, that's what we're going for. And you can eat those straight away, that beautiful fresh green garden peas. And then these are what will be running through the dish to give us that colour. Things like this make our dishes really aesthetically pleasing, and in our baskets at this time of year you're going to have lots of different colours with all these gorgeous edible blooms, which really is a key characteristic of the March and April hedgerow. So this is number 3, and it's our edible Stitchwort. So here we are then with number 4 on our list today, and if you look down here, whilst it may seem like a very small and unassuming little plant, it is one that packs the most powerful of flavours. Now this little plant here is called ground ivy, otherwise known locally as alehoof. It's got what we call a horseshoe shaped leaf. It's also quite heart-shaped, but it is known as a horseshoe-shaped, and on the top of the leaf, and we'll zoom in a minute, it's got a very small, fine, downy white hair. The flowers are purple and almost look like little snapdragons. They're a beautiful, vivid, vibrant purple colour. Now it packs a flavour because it has a very herby, aromatic flavour. It's very, very strong. It's almost on the sort of marjoram or sage or thyme kind of flavour profile. And because of that, if you're a meat eater, it works very well, worked as a rub into red meats. But if you're not a meat eater and you just like a nice herby flavour, it's really nice in things like dumplings or stuffing mixtures. I quite like to put it into bread dough, for example. But also the little flowers are just really nice run through a salad, especially if you're doing some kind of Greek cooking or Turkish cooking. It works well in those kind of dishes with those flavours. So ground ivy, very small, very unassuming. You have to get down low and really look in fields and grassland, meadow areas, and on the very bottom of the banks of hedgerow, and look for these gorgeous little purple flowers. So that is ground ivy, the beautiful, wonderful, powerful herb of the hedgerow. So the final plant on our list today was found here with this stunning backdrop of the sea behind me. We're very lucky to live here on the Rame Peninsula, and very lucky today to find the last edible on our list, which is yarrow. Now yarrow is one of the most medicinal plants that we have growing at this time of year, but it's also a flavoursome herb and a wild edible. So let me tell you first a little bit about the medicinal nature of this plant. So yarrow's Latin name is Achilles, and it's said that Achilles stuffed the wounds of his soldiers using this plant, and that is because it's very good at stopping bleeding. It acts as a natural coagulant. Now if you have cut yourself, like I just have, not for the purpose of the camera, but because I am sat with a lot of thorns and nettles, then we could stop that bleeding very easily by crushing the leaf of yarrow and putting it on the wound. So all you would do is take a few of the little yarrow fronds, and they look like little feathers. Now if you look down into the grass, you'll see it all growing, the young growth. It does get very, very long, and then when it comes to flower, it has these beautiful white flower heads which are sometimes tinged pink or purple. But the young growth is very small, almost feather-like in appearance. So you would take a few of those leaves, and like we do with the plantain, if you look back in previous episodes, you scramble it up and you're going to release the juices of that plant. It's not juicy like plantain, but you just want to start to make it moist and make it like a poultice, and then you put it on the area where you're bleeding, and that will naturally help to draw the wound together. Now it's also very good at reducing fever. So if you're starting to feel like you've got a cold or you've got a sore throat and your glands are up, if you put young yarrow leaves into tea and drink that tea, it will naturally take the fever down and make you feel a little bit better. So it's something that I always make up into a jug, and I put it in the fridge if my children are poorly or if I'm not feeling very well, and then I sip that throughout the day, and it takes my glands down, and I do feel like I'm starting to feel a bit more like myself. As a herb though, it does have a very unusual flavour, much like a peppery cucumber. Now some people say the young leaves almost taste aniseedy. What I get though is a cucumber note and spicy. Now the little young yarrow leaves like this, you can just take and eat like that, and give it a chew, and you get those aromatic, lovely, spicy floral notes on the tongue. When the leaves start to get a bit bigger, the way that I take the leaves off the stalk is to hold it in my hand and just run my fingers down the stalk like this, and you pull off those little leaves into the palm of your hand, and then you can almost use those like a parsley garnish. Now what I've done today with my yarrow is I've infused it with fennel into a homemade ricotta, and that's what we're going to use now in our cookery demonstration to show you how to make a really simple, beautiful, fresh cheese. And then we're going to be making a Victorian-style picnic with all our wonderful edible wildflowers, and showing you as well how to put together a simple brew for your post-foraging excursion. So that was number 5 on our list, the beautiful young yarrow fronds of this beautiful spring March day. So here we are at the cookery section of our show today, and we're in the glorious woodland, and we're going to be doing 3 of my favourite things in life, which is bread, cheese and a cup of tea. And the way to make those really special at this time of year is to use the gorgeous array of ingredients that we have found on our foraging walk today. So to give you a little run through of what they were, at the very start of our walk we had our lovely fennel, which is going to give us our anise, our aniseed-like flavour. We have got our sweet violets, our little purple violet flowers that smell and taste just like Parma violets, the little sweeties that you get when you're a kid. We've got our stitchwort, our little white flower here with its little unopened flower buds that taste like fresh peas. And we have got our little tiny ground ivy flowers, our powerful herb that packs a punch, which is going to give us a marjoramey thymy-like flavour through the dish. So what are we going to do? Well, first of all, we have to make our cheese. And how do we do that? Well, very simply, first of all, you need some organic whole milk. Now, when I'm making cheese for the family, I like to use a whole 4 pints. When we're here, we're just going to use maybe half of it and do a small version of one I made earlier. So you're going to pour that amount of milk into your pan if you're just doing a small cheese. Now, we've already done that before we started filming, so we're ready to go. The next thing you need to do is get some lemons. Now we've got some nice organic lemons here that we got from Widdicombe's in Millbrook, which is a local whole food store. Please do shop local and support your local retailers. It's important that you do that to be sustainable. So we've got some nice lemons there. I've got a nice rustic loaf of bread here. I've cut a slice for you. You can make your own bread if you had the time. We've cheated and we've bought a nice loaf from the shops. And then you need some hot water in your teapot to make your cup of tea. Now let's go through the cheese first. So you've got your milk in the pan. You want to bring it to the boil. Now be very, very careful when you bring milk to the boil in a pan. It feels like you're waiting for ages. If you walk away and start doing something else, you'll have a disaster. It will all bubble over the pan and go absolutely everywhere. So you must make sure you're watching your pan to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, we've had this going for a little while now, and it started to bubble and come to the boil. What we want to do is add some flavours into that milk infusion. So using some of our herbs then, we're going to take some of our yarrow and put a nice peppery flavour into that milk to start with. So we're going to put some of this lovely yarrow in, and just use your hands. You don't have to use a knife, you can just rip it, put it straight in. Get some more of the fronds. Remember, if the fronds are very big and stalky, you can rip the leaves away from the stalk. I'll do one now to show you. Just pull them down and you can put those in there. Making sure I've got lots of my beautiful fennel then. I want that lovely aniseedy flavour running through the cheese. It gives it a really fresh, beautiful flavour. I'm going to rip those and put them in as well. One more. Now this is now coming up to the boil. And you'll see that when you leave it boiling, the milk will also form a slight skin across the top. Don't worry about that, that's totally fine. Now, this is where it gets interesting and a science experiment happens. Taking your lemons, you want to squeeze those directly into the milk. Okay, so just get your lemons, squeeze them in. And what will happen is the curds and the whey will separate. Just squeezing that in. If you get any pips, you can catch them in your hand. Try not to get pips into the milk because they will then be in your cheese and you have to spend ages picking them out. Now you'll see in the pan that our curds and our whey are starting to come away from each other. And you get what looks almost like scrambled egg. So mix that round. And actually this one's going a lovely, vibrant green kind of shade because of all the fennel that we have and the yarrow in the pan. Oh, that's smelling absolutely insane. Turn it off the heat. Keep mixing it through. Now this is where you're going to need either a clean tea towel or even better, a fine muslin cloth. Now you can buy muslin cloth on lots of internet sites or in lots of larger retailers like Lawson's and places like that. Put it over a large saucepan with a sieve on the top and being very, very careful not to pour it on yourself or anyone else, you want to tip this mixture into the muslin. Now, ideally, you could hang this over your sink if you have one of those sinks with a tap that looks like that. When we're outside, we quite often hang them over trees. Let's pop that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather this muslin up now, just like this, and I'm going to show you what I have caught in my net, in my muslin. This here, if I unhook that, is the early beginnings of my cheese. Now you want to leave this to drip and strain. You could leave it overnight, just over your taps, or you could leave it for probably 2 hours, I would say. Okay, so you squeeze all that liquid, let it hang. Do not throw away the whey, W-H-E-Y, in the pan. That makes a really, really great stock. It also makes a good base for a cheese sauce. You've got this beautiful whey in the bottom. Don't throw it away, do use it. But this is what we're really looking for, this lovely cheese. Now, once you've let that completely drain of all the whey, you take it out of the muslin and you can put it into a little bowl. And I'm going to show you, Blue Peter style, here's one I made earlier. Here is my homemade yarrow and fennel cheese that I made yesterday, all ready to show you the next process whilst I'm sitting here. So with our cut bread, I'm going to just get loads of my lovely cheese. Oh, scoop it out of there. Yum, yum, yum. So simple, but so delicious. Spread it onto your bread. Oh. But I want to pimp that out with some of the lovely flavours on my bowl here. So I'm going to take little violet flowers and I'm going to push those on the top of the cheese. And eating flowers on bread and in sandwiches is a very Victorian thing to do. Queen Victoria used to put violets or roses on her sandwiches and she would sprinkle sugar on the top. And then I'm going to put a bit more of the fennel using the little fronds on top here. And then, last but not least with this, I'm going to put on some of my pickled cow parsley stems. Now, we haven't spoken about cow parsley in our episodes because it very closely looks like hemlock, and I don't want people running out and picking the wrong thing, but I pickle my cow parsley stems, and I love to have pickles with cheese. And when you're a forager, you do end up with lots of preserves, so I'm going to pop one of those on there. Now, just before I go to munch that and show you how delicious it is, and you're going to go find out when you make it for yourself, I said about a cup of tea. In my teapot here, just before we started filming, I put in lots of my violet flowers because violet tea is absolutely stunning. I'm popping a few more in because I have a few more on the plate, and I'll leave a couple to put on the teacup itself. All you do is you put the violets in the teapot, hot water, and let it infuse for about 10 minutes. Pour that out. Beautiful. I've got a little bit of sugar. I'm going to make it sweet. Put a little bit of sugar in there because I have a sweet tooth. That's my violet tea with my lovely Victorian-style picnic sandwich, my homemade fennel and yarrow ricotta with violets, pickled cow parsley, and a small hint of ground ivy. And that is our cheese-making Victorian picnic for